All right, let's look at the final center in our honeybees unit in Designs in Nature. And the fifth center involves some outdoor time, if you'd like it to. One thing to be aware of in this center is that we are going outside and looking at flowers and hopefully seeing some honeybees in action. And then we are going to talk about the flower in detail. First thing to ask, obviously, again, for the health and safety of the kids and the adults, is to make sure that nobody has an allergy to bee stings. Hopefully nobody gets stung, but something to be aware of. And if there is someone who has an allergy to bee stings, you could do the indoor section or maybe just choose another center here. Obviously we want to avoid that at all costs. So two parts to this section. The first one is to go outside and find some flowers and observe honeybees. There is a form that for the younger kids you might want to do in a group. For older kids, you could give each kid a clipboard and there'll be some copies in there that we can give to them. And we're going out and making observations of flowers and bees and the pollination process in general. So there's this handout called Honeybee Haunt, and there are some questions and ask the kids to collect some information so they can go find a flower, sit quietly by a flower for a couple of minutes and watch to see if any bees or possibly other pollinators come to the flower, and then answer the questions, describe the flower, looking at the bees if they do come and see if they have pollen on their legs, are they collecting nectar, are there other insects, are they crawling or flying or jumping insects, etc. So hopefully find some spots to actually look at the bees in action or other insects in action. And there are two different sections for flowers, so if you have time and want to do two different flowers for each kid or as a group, and see the bees actually out there and discuss the process in action, that would be great. The second part of the section you could do indoor or outdoor, and that is looking at the flowers in detail and talking about the pollination process. So the main part of this part of the center is the diagram of the flower, and it also asks the volunteers to bring in flowers to dissect. The center does have an X-Acto knife, but you need to supply the flowers. It says 4 to 6 flowers, depending obviously on how you want to do the dissection and what the rotation in the class is like. And it gives some examples of flowers that work well. It suggests lilies, poppies, daffodils, gladiolas, and irises, which have large blooms and have the parts of the flower that are easy to dissect. So there is some really good information if you read through the outline and some of the handouts here about the importance of bees and how they work together with the flower. So as an example, one that was impactful for me is that bees pollinate about a quarter of the food that we eat. The way it's written in here, it says that a third of our diet is derived from pollinated plants, and 80% of that is pollinated by bees. That comes out to just over 25% of our food source is reliant on bees for pollination. So a big part of what we eat. There is a handout here that describes some examples for kids. For instance, watermelons, they require pollination from bees to produce fruit. Peaches are the same way. And it talks about some of the other fruit or plants here that increase the yield with pollination, like apples and almonds. So big part of our diet. I think that could be pretty impactful to the kids. When you get around to the flower dissection itself, you can read through the outline. It talks in detail about the different parts of the flower and the pollination process. Obviously the important parts are looking at the flower itself, the petals, the color, the size, and talking to the kids about the purpose there, obviously to draw in the insects, to draw in the animals, who's ever pollinating. There is a handout here that shows what bees see compared to what we see when we look at flowers, and obviously bees are adapted to seeing colors of flowers, and so you can talk about their eyes a little bit and how they're attracted to the petals and the size, color of the flower. Then the other parts of the flower, the stamen and the pistil, and you can read and talk about how those interact in pollination. Obviously, you get the pollen from the stamen, and hopefully the bees fly around and cross-pollinate. They pollinate the flower, cross-pollinate, and but get the pollen to the stamen at the end of the stigma at the end of the pistil, and then that travels down and pollinates the seeds so that the next flower can grow. The process we're going to use to dissect the flower, and again, you can read through the detail, but basically you're going to cut off the pistil and cut it in half, and then you can see there's a blown up picture of that here, where you can look at the different seeds and where the fruit comes from, etc. Hopefully the flowers that you find, you can actually see the detail there. But I encourage you to, again, read through the pollination section. It gives a lot of the detail on the parts. I'm sure with the older kids especially, you can talk about the details of the different parts and how the pollination process works and how it's a big part of what we need in order to get the food that we eat. So if you have any questions, email us at mitchellelf@gmail.com. And thanks so much for your volunteering this year, as this is the final center. Hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to having volunteers help out next year. Thanks.